On this episode, I talk with horror director Charlie Steeds. You may know him from some of his films like Death Ranch, An English Haunting, Winter Skin, Vampire Virus, or The Barge People. But he's known for a shit ton of other movies as well. But he's got a new one coming out at the end of this month called Werewolf Castle, which looks really killer, and I can't wait to check that out. But hope you enjoy this talk. He's a really cool dude, and had a really killer time talking with him. So check it out, and thanks for listening. All right. Thanks for being on my podcast, Charlie.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we've been friends for a while online, so it's good to finally actually talk. So
Absolutely, yeah.
how's everything going your way?
Yeah, it's very good. Busy editing at the moment, which is kind of my least favorite part of the whole process. And I've got like a backlog of about 3 movies that I have to edit. So I'm just sort of in post-production hell, but it's nice to be home and, you know, just able to sit and watch movies in the evenings and relax. So yeah.
Yeah, you're busy as hell, man. Like I keep up with you on Instagram and Twitter and stuff, and you're always either filming or you're, like I said, you're editing, and like you're constantly busy.
Oh yeah, I mean this year's been ridiculously busy. I mean since coronavirus and lockdown, I mean there was a brief period where things seemed to be a little bit quiet, and I mean I was lucky because at the start of the lockdown here, I went into the lockdown with 2 films to edit, so that was really like a great position to be in because you're locked down, but I didn't have to stop working. You know, I could just carry on. So I got those 2 movies edited, and then as soon as I've come out of the lockdown, it seems to be the most, just the busiest time. Like, you know, people offering me this project and that project, and you know, usually I do 2 movies a year, and I've always sort of said I'd like to slow down and do 1 movie per year and just spend more time on it. But this year I've already shot 3 movies, and then there could be another one in the pipeline. I'm not sure.
Wow, that's crazy. That's a lot of movies in 1 year. I mean, I bet your workload is huge. Like you said, you're probably just constantly doing something, either editing or, you know, doing something with the film or this or that. So.
Yeah, which has been nice. I mean, I can't complain. I mean, part of the reason I took on 3 for this year is because, you know, lockdown was so boring. And I mean, last year I only was able to shoot 1 movie, and that was right at the start of the year as well. And it was a really nightmare production. And then, you know, I spent, 10 months or so unable to shoot anything. So it's been, this year so far, I've spent about 5 months away from home. So it's just been like traveling and seeing people. And on top of that, everyone else was locked down at this time. You know, we were exempt from lockdown rules. So that was nice to be able to like go out and actually make stuff.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I bet, because yeah, the whole lockdown stuff was crazy. Like for us, like was it last year was kind of like our big lockdown thing, and then you know they released the lockdown for us this year, and you know things have been kind of sort of back to normal, but you know there's some another variant of the virus is going around now, so things are getting kind of weird again around here. So
Yeah.
so I'm hoping for the best. You know, I want to get things back to normal again, but I don't think they're going to be normal anytime soon. You know, it's just going to be something we're going to have to deal with for a while.
Yeah, no, exactly.
What films are you working on right now? The 3 films you got going on?
So the first of the 3 is a film. The title is Werewolf Castle. And basically, I made a film last year called A Werewolf in England for a company. And when it came out, it did really well in sort of supermarkets and stuff. So the company sort of instantly got in touch with me and said they wanted another werewolf film. But it was really sprung upon me at the last moment. It was like I wasn't expecting them to ask. I didn't know this film was coming. So from the moment they said, right, we want a werewolf film, and we just essentially the brief was just there needs to be werewolves in a castle. At some point. So I said, you know, what about if we did medieval and we did something with knights? You know, I've been wanting to do a medieval film, like a fantasy with knights and stuff like that, and swords and things for a while. So this was sort of my opportunity. So I jumped in and said, you know, yeah, I'll do it if I can have knights and stuff. But, you know, like a month later, the script was basically done. And then a month later, we were in a castle in Wales filming this. So
Wow.
that was like a quick turnaround. But it's a different sort of a film for me because it is a above being a horror, I suppose it is just a fantasy movie. It is a group of knights on a quest to the king in a castle. It doesn't feel so much like a horror, but it does have a whole bunch of werewolves in it. In my previous film, in my previous werewolf film, we had like three werewolves. You only ever really saw two on screen at a time, but in this one, we've got like six on screen at a time because there's like it's supposed to be like a whole sort of army of werewolves. Um,
Nice.
so that's one of the projects, and that's what I've basically almost finished post production on, and that'll be out later this year in the UK at least.
Hmm.
And then the other project for the same company is it doesn't really have a title yet. The working title is The Haunting of Bloody Tower, and it's again it's medieval. It's set in the Tower of London, and it's based on a true story of these two princes that were allegedly murdered in the Tower of London by someone wanting to be the king. And so in my story, it's basically these two princes are haunting the sort of dungeons of the Tower of London. And it's a bit sort of like The Shining inspired, in that like a guy with sort of psychic powers, he can see the dead and sort of see visions of the dead and speak to them and stuff. He ends up locked up in the dungeon of the tower, and the sort of nice people in the Tower of London, who's basically a priest and like the Queen's helper, they use this guy's power to try and put the corrupt people in the tower, get rid of them basically.
Hmm.
So that's one of them. That one's a little bit more sort of like that. I mean, that's a pure horror movie, and I've really sort of it's been fun because I've just sort of thrown everything into that movie. There's corpses of the children, and there's the ghosts of the children, but then there's also the ghosts of just other people. So we had this like whole horde of different ghosts, and we've got the castle, we've got the dungeon, there's a torture chamber. We filmed it in January and February, which was freezing cold, and some of these actors, I've got them like strapped up naked in the torture chamber. I've got two guys hung naked from the ankles upside down, being sort of flogged and tortured. So there's sort of all sorts of like medieval torture and goodness in there. So that's one of them as well. And then the one that is actually, it's the only one that is based on my own personal concept. Is basically a different company. They got in touch. They wanted a science fiction movie. So I kind of had to rummage through all my ideas. I mean, I always keep like a sort of folder of various different film ideas because I come up with so many.
Hmm.
There's one from a few years ago, which is essentially it's like a very Lovecraft inspired idea, and it's about a group of scientists. They're basically studying the ocean in Antarctica, and on the seabed they find a sort of ancient portal that leads to the deepest point of the ocean that man has ever got. It's a sort of a deeper point than anyone thought possible. So they build a deep sea submersible and send a group of scientists on it down to this bottom of the sea, down into the portal, where they find basically a sort of graveyard of Cthulhu creatures. Just their corpses are there on the ocean floor, among sort of the ruins of a sort of ancient city. They go and sort of take a flesh sample from one of the Cthulhu creatures, and obviously it awakens and it's not actually quite dead. And then once the sample's on board the deep sea submersible, it's infecting people and getting into their heads. They're starting to see sort of cosmic visions. There's slime. There's lots of sort of tentacles erupting from people and blood, and a bit of a sort of like Aliens influence, as it gets towards the end. People have got machine guns, but we built. I mean, it was really time consuming. We built the deep sea submersible as a set. It kind of looks like some sort of cross between a spaceship and a submarine, but in a very sort of like I guess like B movie 80s style. Um, but it was really great to have just be running around this huge location, this huge set build. There was like a paddling pool built into the floor because we needed these like pressure doors to open so that people could go out into the ocean. And we set the whole thing on fire. We flooded it. We had water spraying from the ceiling, blood everywhere. So it was really fun. Yeah.
Huh, yeah, that sounds killer. And I'm pretty sure most of these are gonna be practical effects. 'Cause I noticed a lot of your films are a lot of cool practical stuff.
Yeah, in fact, so with this film, we have yet to shoot the practical, all the sort of practical effect side of things, aside from obviously like what we did for the interior of the ship. I mean, the exterior of this submersible is going to be a whole new challenge for me. Because I mean, as you can imagine from the plot outline that I just gave you, it's like, submersible at the bottom of the sea, and this portal, and the Cthulhu creatures. So we've built all of these separate elements practically. I have miniatures being created of the submersible. I have my gigantic Cthulhu suit that has been made. I think that's in the mail on the way to me now. But I mean, as far as I know, I mean, basically, I went for I went for classic Cthulhu. Like I really want to put traditional, like that classic looking Cthulhu, green with the big wings, with the tentacled face on screen, because in a feature horror film, I don't think we've seen it before. Like I might be wrong, but I can't think of any film where we've seen that traditional winged Cthulhu.
Right.
So to have him, I mean, we'll be shooting all this against a green screen. So yeah, it's basically going to be a man in a suit, doing all, and I'll be doing all the sort of photography against the green screen, and then there will be a sort of digital ocean put in around it. But it should be interesting. We'll see how it turns out.
How big's the suit, you think? I know you're getting it shipped to you, but do you know how big the suit's actually going to be, or?
Yeah. I mean, so it's the size that you put a person in it, and it's already pretty big on top of that person, because this suit goes on top of a person, so it's got great big sort of on the arms have got great big claws. It's got great big sort of fins coming out of the arms, and then on top of that, you've got these gigantic wings that sort of through metal rods sort of insert into the back of the suit. So it should be like pretty big.
Do you use like a certain company for all your like suits and stuff for your creatures?
Yeah, so this suit's like a mixture. It's but basically, I mean, mostly what I've been using the last couple of years is a company in Arizona called Midnight Studios Effects.
Hmm.
So obviously, when I got asked to do my werewolf movie, I thought, first of all, I wouldn't even bother doing it if I didn't think I could get like a semi-decent looking werewolf. But obviously, I'm doing this stuff on a budget, and I came across Midnight Studios Effects, and I will say their werewolves are just fantastic. Like the suits are just incredible to look at. Trying to sort of then bring them to life on screen is kind of a whole different challenge in itself, because they don't have animatronic faces and things like that. But this is where I say the budget constraints all comes in. So in Werewolf in England, I mean, Werewolf in England is a very silly comedy movie. Like, it's not supposed to be taken too seriously. It's very camp and B movie. So I didn't really mind that the werewolves' faces didn't move. I wasn't trying to make them look realistic necessarily, so that never bothered me. We made no effort to make the faces look like they had mouths opening or eyes moving. But for Werewolf Castle, we had a different werewolf design done with the heads, where the mouths actually are movable.
Hmm.
So the mouths do move a little bit more. And so that basically they're the guys who I've been going to for my creature suits, and they're the ones who have done this Cthulhu. Yeah.
Oh, that's killer. They did Barge People as well.
No. Barge People was, I mean, the Barge People essentially was just a bunch of silicone masks,
Hmm.
by a sort of the big silicone mask company. but I see those masks popping up more and more in all these other like indie films, and I mean it's always bugged me that I knew at the time, in fact, when I used these masks, it always bugs me when I don't get something custom made.
Right.
So, and Midnight Studios effects are really accommodating in that when I ask for things to be customized in certain ways, they will actually they'll do that for me. And in fact, there's a project that will at some point go ahead. It was almost going to happen this year, but now I guess it will happen next year. But Midnight Studios were going to be doing like a sort of custom, a whole custom creature design for me, which I've never been able to be in a position with budget to actually just give someone a sketch and say, that's my creature, can you custom make this whole thing for me, straight from my imagination. I've always had to sort of find online something that's pre-existing that I can sort of afford to put into the movie. So yeah.
Well, that's killer. Yeah, that was one of the big things for me I liked about Werewolf in England was the werewolves themselves. Like I didn't even notice that their mouth didn't move and stuff. I guess the way it was shot and stuff, how he used them
Yeah.
kind of sparsely for a little while, and then they popped in towards the end, used them more there. But I really dug the design and stuff. I thought it looked pretty cool.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I said, when I searched the internet, because the thing is with werewolf films, especially independently made werewolf films like modern ones, I think, I'm practically speaking, in terms of practical effects, we had great werewolves in The Howling, great werewolves in American Werewolf in London, and that's kind of it. I'm not a huge sort of werewolf movie fan. Well, in fact, no, I miss out. Bad Moon. That's my
Oh,
favorite. That's my favorite werewolf that's ever been put on film. I think that's the peak of werewolves. But this is like the 80s. And then in terms of like indie film, I mean, I've watched a lot of indie werewolf films, and the main problem is always, it always comes down to the werewolf. Werewolves are so difficult. It's such a hard thing to achieve, especially on a budget. And I don't think they look good if it's CGI. I think CGI totally ruins it. Especially with people, from if you're a fan of The Howling and American Werewolf, people have an expectation to see a werewolf as a practical creation. But perhaps that was the peak of practical werewolves way back then, and that is sort of like top horror filmmakers, making them. So it's so challenging, as a modern day indie filmmaker. But when I found the Midnight Studios effects werewolves, I thought they were definitely by far the best I've ever seen outside of, let's say, like The Howling and Bad Moon, So I was thrilled. I mean, on set, seeing the werewolves sort of stomping around and having them there practically and being able to sort of like fight them and stuff, it was thrilling to be able to shoot it. So yeah, I really had a great time with that and with those werewolves. But like I say, when it came down to sort of unleashing the film onto horror fans, there's always criticism, but there was a bit of criticism of well, the heads don't move and these are disappointing. He's like, well, what do you want? This is an indie film.
Yeah, people can be assholes sometimes, man. Like they don't see it for what it is, Like I enjoyed the shit out of it when you sent me the screener for it because I saw some production pictures you had for it. I said, oh, cool, new werewolf movie. I got to get on that. And after watching stuff, it being that it was a horror comedy too, it all fit in really well together.
Yeah, thank you.
Speaking on werewolves, I think the last like one of the best practical effects werewolf movies was Dog Soldiers. I think that came out late 90s, early 2000s, I believe. That was like the last great werewolf design, in my opinion.
Yeah, in fact, yeah, I agree with you on that. I'd forgotten that one, but the Dog Soldiers werewolves are still really damn good and creepy.
Yeah, the whole like super height, like they're so tall and like lanky looking, man, and they got like the perfect like wolf face and shit. Yeah, it got me when I first saw it when I was younger. I was like, man, that's pretty creepy.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, so I've done these two werewolf movies now, and they kind of they were both sort of thrust upon me. It was never my idea to do werewolves, but now that I've done two, I'm thinking more and more about, a third where I can actually, engage my own brain and try and think, right, how would I like to do werewolves? Because I'd love to do like a proper scary werewolf movie where I properly take a moment and think about the effects and how we're really going to make these werewolves look realistic, and how we're going to do one up from what already exists. But it's difficult when a company comes to you and what they want is werewolves, and you just sometimes the demands of the investors, you just kind of think like, shit, how is this gonna look on a budget? But then you just sort of go ahead and try your best and see what comes out.
Hmm. And right now, I think we're on a kind of on the cusp of a new like werewolf revolution, I guess. Like there's a bunch of werewolf films planned that's supposed to be coming out, in the next 10 years and stuff. I've seen a few starting to come out now. Like I haven't seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think so because I keep, I mean, even just in the sort of independent film circuit, and the types of budgets I work with, I keep hearing the demand for werewolf movies. The guy who played the werewolf in my werewolf films, he's playing a character in a whole other werewolf film at the moment, that's shooting literally right now.
Hmm.
So there's all this werewolf stuff being shot, so yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm super happy about it. I'm tired of zombies, and I'm kind of tired on the vampire stuff, but not as much as I am on zombies. Like zombies is so overdone. They've been done every single way I can see conceivable. I'm good. I want something different. I love werewolf movies from the '80s and like a few in the '90s, like Bad Moon and what Dog Soldiers. What I think came out 2000, could have been '99, one of those years. But yeah, I'm ready for a new like werewolf revolution.
Yeah, yeah, no.
So, what got you started in film? What's your origin story on all this?
Well, essentially, I've always, I mean, basically, I've always loved telling sort of scary stories since I was really young. Since I was like 6 years old, the older kids at school and stuff like that would all be telling scary stories, and it was sort of this forbidden thing. I wasn't allowed to hear them, I wasn't allowed to listen, but we used to like put a cloth over the table and all go and sit under the table in the dark and like listen to scary stories. It was always the much older kids that were doing it, but I used to go and listen as well. And I just became obsessed with. I mean, I used to be terrified of all things horror. It used to just absolutely scare me to death. But looking back, I just had some sort of an obsession with dark and scary things. Like it just was there from when I was like 6 years old. And then like, Goosebumps on the TV, and just all these types of things. And then when I got to about age, I don't know, 11, 10 or 11, I started to get really interested in films, and specifically like Tim Burton movies. And I loved with Tim Burton, what I loved was you could see such a extreme style, in the production design and the costume and everything like that, and the music. And between films, you could see that it was the same person. It was like the same style going between films, and that kind of taught me what a director is bringing to a project. And then I sort of became really interested in Stephen King. And that was because I just kept seeing this name everywhere,
Mm.
on DVDs, on books, Stephen King, obviously. And this was back when, I had no idea who Stephen King was. I was just a guy, just a kid browsing, DVD shops and bookshops and always attracted to horror. So I kept seeing this one name. And I thought, I need to find out who this guy is. And really, my gateway into horror, because like I said, I was definitely too scared to ever touch a single horror movie. Like I would not watch horror. My mum would sometimes like flick over on the channel to a horror film, and it would like make me cry. And I'm talking, this is when I'm like 11 years old, and I should really be crying over like some probably like 12 rated horror movie. But I was just like so scared of everything. And then the first Stephen King thing I bought was the miniseries Rose Red, uh,
Hmm.
which I still love now. And because it was only rated a 12, I thought maybe I can, maybe I can put up with this. And I just loved it, and I still still my passion for horror and what I, hope to achieve in my career making horror, it all comes back to Stephen King miniseries, because as a kid there was just nothing better to me than on a weekend to just grab a Stephen King miniseries and put it in, and then some of these things are like 4 hours, 5 hours long, and you're just absorbed into this whole world of horror. I mean, what could be better for someone who like adores horror? What could be more, incredible than to just sit down and spend like, a Sunday afternoon, watching Storm of the Century or something like that, or the Shining miniseries. So that was really what got me hooked on horror. And basically my sort of education in horror sort of grew out from there. I would watch Creepshow, and then I'd see, oh, it was directed by George Romero. Okay, I'm going to go and track down all his other movies, and then I'd watch all of his movies. And it just kind of was like that, just working through Stephen King adaptations. And that remains sort of that's sort of the type of horror that I love the most. I just think Stephen King film and TV adaptations is just what nails for me the essence of what I love about the genre. But I mean now, I love so much more than that. Obviously, I mean, I'm a huge horror fan, and I mean, literally every day I'm buying and watching horror movies and horror books and stuff. Big Italian horror fan. Like, in terms of who influences my actual filmmaking, Lucio Fulci and Mario Bava are huge influences. Obviously John Carpenter, Rob Zombie, all these types of people. But so basically from that young age, from being obsessed with Stephen King, really just the films and the TV, not the books, because I did used to read a lot, but I've not really read any Stephen King, to be honest.
Right.
But from there, I just literally from age 10, 11, I just knew I want to direct movies. And I'm kind of lucky that in my head, that was just it. I was just straight away, I was just obsessed with this idea. I'm gonna just direct films, and that's what I want to do. So when I finished school, I went to film school in London, and from there graduated and just sort of started making. I mean, I was always, all my teenage years, I was making short films. Some of these short films would be, usually about 25 minutes long to half an hour long, but sometimes they were like 50 minutes long, or 45 minutes long. And I made 20 of these over the course of a bunch of years when I was a teenager. And then eventually I just thought, well, I'll make a feature-length movie. Just the same way I've done these short films, with barely any budget. So I made this feature-length movie. I mean, the total budget of it was under $2,000. So really, we're talking like a no-budget film.
Mm-hmm.
And then got a call out of the blue from a sales company in California, and I was, I think, 20 or 21 at the time, 21 probably, and they just called me out of the blue and said they wanted the rights to the movie and they were going to put it on DVD. And so then I went ahead and agreed, and then it, came out on DVD and Blu-ray, and it's popping up in all these different countries. I mean, I was proud of the film at the time. Nowadays, I don't even mention the film because it was really just like, I like to treat it as just a stepping stone that got me into this, being able to do this as a full-time career. But I mean, before long, I mean, there was a year or so of, having to work a regular day job, but I just have always had this sort of addiction to making movies on the back burner. And even when I was working full time for that sort of brief period, I would come home and I'd just be editing and writing and carrying on my usual business. And before long, I was being offered budgets, and now I'm able to do it full time. So, obviously, still still there's a lot that I hope to achieve, and there's a long way that I hope to go. My films, they're extremely low budget still. It's like they're extremely low budget, but they're able to make me a full-time living. Um, and to be honest, I try and just enjoy. I just try and enjoy each project. I put my heart and soul into each project that I'm doing.
Mhm.
And people, I mean, you can look at what I've made so far, and it looks like I'm making a lot very fast, which I suppose I am, but none of it to me feels rushed or anything. Like I tend to spend about 10 months on each movie, and probably 6 of those months will be just dedicated to the movie, and I work on it, pretty much 7 days a week.
Mhm.
um, Writing is my biggest passion in all of it. And then the shoots are usually about 20-22 days, something like that. And yeah, I just try and make the film as best they can possibly be, with always the constant frustration of budget limitations. And that's sort of just how I've been going for the last sort of 4 years or so.
Well, that's great. You get to make a living of make a living of what you love. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I feel completely lucky to be able to do it. I mean, when I was at film school, well, it's crazy, because when I was at film school, I didn't even think it was possible to. First of all, I didn't think it was possible to make films of the budget level I make films at. And people teach. I think they probably still teach that it's not possible to make films the way I make films, which is, you don't need a crew of 50 people, and you don't need all this money.
Mhm.
I was kind of the mindset that, if I was going to wait around for all the right things to be in place, a huge chunk of money and everything, if I was going to wait around, I still would be sat here having never made a single film, you
Right.
know. But I just thought, let's just do it. Like, no one has any excuse these days, because you can buy really cool cameras for like under $1,000. You can get a great camera. You can just, anyone can just go out and shoot anything these days. My whole kit that I currently shoot with, is pretty inexpensive. I'm going to say, like, probably around 5 grand or something.
Mhm.
It's probably the cost of my whole kit, which is like built up over the years. But basically, if you can just get a few bits and pieces together, I mean, anyone can go out and make something these days. So there's kind of no excuse. And I was in that mindset, like, let's not wait for some company to come along and think, oh, I'm some sort of genius of horror films, like, let's hire him. I just thought, that's never going to happen. So let's just go out and just do it myself. And I've had to just basically work from the ground up, from, no budget to a little bit of budget, to now what I've got, which is like still a little budget, but it pays my living. Um, yeah, that's basically just that's how I've had to sort of come into the industry.
What's the average size of your crew that you work with?
Well, nowadays it tends to be, I mean, I'm always really interested in keeping it as small as possible. And I used to tell everyone, that it was really just 2 of us making the films. And in
Mhm.
the case of a film like the film that I probably consider like my most professional and slick looking film in terms of its cinematography and location and production values, is An English Haunting,
Mhm.
which is a haunted house movie I made, which I'm really proud of that movie. That movie was made with just 2 people. That's my cinematographer doing the lights and the camera, and me directing and doing the sound.
Mhm.
And for the first 5 or 6 features, I did the sound as well as directing, because that's basically how I was doing things, was with a tiny little crew. And this is really just like a money saving technique. But at the beginning, it was really because this is all that I could afford. And as I went on, it was kind of like okay, we have the money to hire in a couple of extra hands, if we want a gaffer, and let's get a sound man so that I don't have to direct and do the sound at the same time.
Hmm.
But I just kind of started to get used to that way of filmmaking, and also enjoy it, because I enjoy the feeling of, like, when you're working with actors, I enjoy the feeling of there not being a crew. It makes it really much more sort of personal to just be able to, my cinematographer would kind of be very quiet, and sort of he'd do his job and he'd kind of be invisible, and then I'd be able to just step in and work with my actors, and it kind of just felt like, I guess, like rehearsing for stage or something like that. You're not really needing to consider the fact that you're on a film set, but I just saw like how relaxed everybody was, how friendly the sets got, and it's just a very, very chilled out way of filmmaking, where in a a filmmaking environment should, I imagine it should be a bit more sort of high pressure, and more people around, but it's just very chill the way I do movies. But now it's a bit different. If I need makeup, then there's the makeup person, and then someone wants to come and just help out and learn a bit about lighting, so then someone comes in and does a bit of extra lighting, and then I've got someone now who just does sort of not an assistant necessarily, but just sort of is my right hand man who just helps me out with everything. And then on top of that, I'll have someone in for like some catering, and then I now have a sound man. So the crew's got a bit bigger, but it still essentially comes down to, like, maybe three people. At the core, like I would feel very comfortable going into a shoot day as long as I've got three of us, which is just like, like I said, at film school, they didn't teach me that films could be done this way. But, I can confidently say to anyone, like, if you don't believe me that three people is enough, or even two people is enough, go and have a look at my film English Haunting, because I'm really I know I had everything I needed to get that movie made, and it's looking at a film like that is what makes me think, well, why do I need all this crew? You know,
Right.
um, and I do have the experience of working with more people, because I have been on sets where there's been like a crew of 30 and stuff like that. I directed a feature with a crew of like 30 back early on, and I just prefer it to be, less people. But yeah, I mean, I never tend to really speak about that, because it kind of, it puts a downer on the films. If you say to someone, watch my movie, it's really good and was made with two people in the crew, people,
Right.
they're not going to bother with your piece of shit movie, because how good can it really be? So I tend never to really mention that. But no, that's how I've been doing it. Yeah.
That's killer. I like the DIY aspect of it, pretty much doing it all yourself or with a small group of trusted people. I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, and it really is just like, my filmmaking crew and the actors. We're just like a little family, really. We're just friends having a great little time. Obviously there's a certain level of professionalism about it all, because at the end of the day, we do have to deliver the films to the people who are paying for them. But it just it feels no different actually than when I was a teenager, and I'd get my school friends together on the weekend and just have a fun time. It just feels like that, but somebody else is just paying for us to have all that fun.
Right. No, that's killer, man. I think that's really, really cool. I wish, having a strong like foundation of friends like that and people you can work with, that makes all the difference.
Yeah.
Well, what would you say out of all the films you've done, what's your absolute favorite? Do you have one?
Yeah, well, I have three favorites, and that is Death Ranch, that's been released this year, which is a sort of like, my sort of tribute to like grindhouse movies, and I shot that film over in Tennessee, and I just had the best shoot. Like, nobody on the shoot. I had not met anybody on the shoot until I actually got to Tennessee, and then there was like I can't remember how long now, but there was maybe like 2 weeks of prep, and then we were all in doing the shoot, and it just went so smoothly and it just went so well. But that film's particularly close to my heart because, I mean, the plot of the film is that three African American siblings back in the 70s in the American South are sort of on the run from the police. One of them's escaped from prison. And they hide out in their old family ranch, which has been abandoned for years. And as night falls, they hear a bit of a commotion in the nearby woods, and they go out to the woods, and there's a whole KKK clan doing sort of a cross burning, and they all get captured and tortured and all sorts of nasty things. But essentially, it turns into a sort of crazy revenge movie, very sort of just exploitation inspired, just full of sort of gore and nastiness. And I'd had this idea for a few years, and just nobody. I mean, it's a hard sell because of the KKK and the sort of like the black characters getting their revenge, and it being so, it's kind of, in a way, it's tackling sort of like issues of racism in such a sort of like extreme and aggressive way, with so much sort of like gore and just outrageousness. So everyone sort of loved the idea, but everyone was also like, we're never going to fund this movie because, like, why would we put our money behind this? Like something like werewolves or vampires is a much safer bet than KKK cannibals, and blaxploitation. But I was able to get some producers involved who just found some private investment, and they were kind of happy for me to basically just go ahead and make whatever I wanted. And so I saw this opportunity to make this like dream project a reality. We went and shot Death Ranch, and then completely to my surprise, the film, is in Walmart. It got a really good release. It got picked up by a whole bunch of distributors. It's coming out in the UK in October. And it's kind of, to be honest, changed my view of the type of like the level of industry that I'm working at. I was here thinking that you could only get a film out there and have it be successful if you listen to what the investors are saying is going to sell. If they're saying, right, the supermarkets want, werewolves, so let's get like our CGI stock image of a werewolf and plonk it on the cover, and let's have a title that completely rips off some other film, and let's see, and that's how we're going to make our money. I didn't think that you could sort of get together a DVD cover that is a complete throwback to blaxploitation and the sort of movies that I'm inspired by, Coffee and Foxy Brown and all that sort of stuff. And just chuck that out there with a film about, the KKK being having revenge taken upon them and stuff. I didn't think that was possible, and yet here we are this year watching it out on the shelves in Walmart and stuff like that. I just didn't realize that that could be done. So so for that reason, that film is I mean, I like the film anyway, but it's a favorite of mine because of that reason. It's maybe the only film that, I mean, as I got to the end of editing the film, I just felt kind of I felt like emotional, like I'm not a filmmaker who like rewards themselves. I don't get to the end of the film and say to myself, well done, that was a lot of work you just did over the last 10 months, good job. Like, I'm not that sort of person. I always get to the end and I'm kind of like, forget this stupid movie. I did it. I made mistakes. Let's get it out on DVD and get rid of it and just focus on the next one. I'm not one for looking back. But when I got to the end of Death Ranch, I felt just kind of emotional, like that that this idea that I didn't think I could ever make happen, I made happen. I think for aspiring filmmakers, certainly when I was a few years younger, you kind of look at movies and filmmakers and you think, people out there might be thinking, oh, Charlie can just come up with an idea, like Haunted House, and he can just go and make whatever the hell he wants. But as the money has got, as the budgets have got higher, you're more and more restricted in terms of what you can actually put out there. And the people, I mean, it's kind of it's ridiculous in a way, because the people with the small amount of money that I have, who are basically going to the straight to DVD market, we have to make the most generic content, because if it's going to be purchased by people who are going out to buy these films, it has to kind of be like a rip-off. It has to have the element of like if like my first horror film, Escape from Cannibal Farm, I made my guy in that look a bit like Leatherface, or look quite a lot like Leatherface actually. And that was how they were able to sell it, because they're tying it in with this whole Texas Chainsaw thing. But if you're talking about totally original horror movie ideas, that's not what the straight to DVD market is for. They want generic things, and then you're extremely limited, because you get stuck just making some crappy vampire film, some crappy werewolf film, when really what you want to do is, I mean, I'm sat here right now with all these ideas for totally original horror movies, kind of like Death Ranch, that no horror fans, or I hope horror fans would really enjoy. Like me speaking as a horror fan, I just know that I'd love to see, stuff like more cosmic horror. And I mean, sometimes I get lucky, like with my aquatic horror of the submarine going down and finding Cthulhu. That's my own concept. I mean, I was in a lucky position, kind of like with Death Ranch, where a company came to me and they were happy to go with what is my own original idea. But if I had it my way, I would only ever make my own original ideas, and I'd want to be far more experimental. Like, if we're going to do some crap straight to DVD movie that people have a low expectation for, let's at least make it as original as possible. Let's make it something that they've not seen before.
Right. No, totally. I mean, 100% with that, and I understand like the stipulations you have to have if you're trying to throw it out to the DVD market people, like the Walmart buyers and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that little rant aside, Death Ranch is a real favorite of mine, of my own films. English Haunting that I mentioned, I just think I guess that's the sort of horror film, that's the sort of niche in the horror genre that I'd like to sort of carve for myself. This sort of like 70s inspired, very atmospheric British style of horror filmmaking, because I am British, and when I started making horror movies, my first thought was, I'm inspired by American movies. I'm inspired by Texas Chainsaw and Devil's Rejects and stuff like that. So with a film like Cannibal Farm, I was really trying to make it feel sort of as American as possible. I mean, it's set in Britain, but I'm trying to make it look like an American movie. And then with my second feature, The House of Violent Desire, I'm trying to make it look, as Italian as I possibly can, with all sort of Mario Bava inspired lighting and colors. With An English Haunting, I sort of realized, I'm in Britain, and I'm a British filmmaker, and there's all these incredible locations around me that they don't look Italian, they don't look American, they just look very distinctively British. And in fact, my films, as I watch my DVDs come out in Japan and Germany and Australia and stuff like that, you realize that this is my special sort of export, is the Britishness of the films. And that was something I really leaned into with An English Haunting, and that type of sort of bleak, slow burn, atmospheric horror, ghost story that I did with that film. I think I've sort of found a little bit. I found sort of what I would like my voice to be in the future, really, with horror movies. So that one, and then the other one, I guess, is Werewolf in England, just because it's just so fun and sort of silly. It's so camp and silly. It completely leans into um, my personal tastes for films that are just sort of totally over the top and theatrical. When they asked me to do a werewolf film set in the Victorian period, I'm pretty sure they said not to make it a comedy or not to have any. I mean, horror comedy is always a tough sell.
Hmm.
I think I was instructed not to have any comedy or gore. And then I went and made like the most sort of splattery, blood spraying everywhere, stupid, silly comedy werewolf film. So I just to sit down and watch that one I still find quite entertaining. Like I like that film.
Yeah, so do I. Like when I reviewed it and stuff, I was like, oh, this is fun. It was a nice little breath of fresh air, like I said, with the new werewolf film, and being a hard comedy on top of a werewolf film was pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah.
What I know you're working on these three films now. You said you're editing and stuff. You have any other like future movies you can talk about that will be coming out like in the future?
Well, mostly at the moment, I'm just sort of bogged down with these three, because it's so much work to get these three, just to get these three turned around. That's taken me into next year, basically.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, my I can't talk about anything because my plans they always change. They can change so dramatically. But I know that what I'm trying to focus on at the moment is kind of what I was saying there about an English haunting. Is I'm sort of I'm very lucky that I've got companies coming over to me and saying, we'd like you to make this for us or make that for us. I'm definitely really lucky in that respect. But I would like to sort of, I'm looking into trying to find ways of doing things that are more just uniquely what I would like as a horror fan to put on screen instead of, appeasing what the distributors are asking me for. I'd like to just go ahead and make something that, as a horror fan, I've never seen before, and sort of push boundaries, make things really extreme. I kind of sort of censor myself when I make these films because although I'm actually allowed pretty much 100% creative freedom, like I said, they will ask me for werewolves in a castle, but aside from that, I can do whatever I want with that brief. So I've got pretty much 100% creative freedom, but still I censor myself in terms of the level of violence and sex and nastiness and shock value.
Hmm.
I censor myself because I know that it's just not going to be commercial and I'm going to get in trouble if I put something outrageous in there. But I've been working for years on some like really, really dark horror stories, kind of inspired by sort of more Lovecraftian style horror. Um, and I think it's time. I'm hoping it's time where I can finally actually put those on screen, and just put out some like totally original things. Where you don't go, oh, there's the vampires. There's the cheap straight to DVD vampire movie, where you look at it and although it's going to be inevitably on a budget still, you might not be able to categorize it. You might not say, "Oh, this is a haunted house film. This is a werewolf film." It could just be something that, like, you're not expecting, and that should hopefully capture the attention of horror fans. One thing I've been wanting to do for ages is like a fish man or a fish monster invasion movie because I love fish monsters and I love horror that's sort of set at sea or sort of in a harbour town. I love this all comes from sort of my love with Lovecraft stuff, but
Hmm.
like a dream project for me to make in the future if I had like a Hollywood level budget would be Shadow over Innsmouth.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
Lovecraft adaptation.
Mm.
That would be like my dream, because I love that, and I look around England and try and look for like what are the good horror locations that I've not sort of explored that are right here on my doorstep, you know. that I need to put on film, that inspire me to get my camera out and create some really moody, atmospheric horror. And it's really like, some of the little harbour towns down on the south coast of Cornwall, with all their sort of cobbled streets and narrow roads and things like that. These creepy little villages, they come out of a horror movie, and location plays a huge role in what films I'm actually able to go ahead and make. For example, with English Haunting, I was working on a corporate job, just a corporate video shoot, and I come along to this huge country manor, which is completely privately owned by this one family. It's been in the family for 1,000 years. And there's this huge mansion house, and then I'm walking around the grounds. There's this big church, there's a graveyard, there's even like this sort of shattered glass greenhouse, which has all been overgrown with vines and stuff. And I just thought there and then, this needs to be in a horror movie. This is like a haunted house, horror movie material. So I made friends with the owners on that corporate shoot. And a couple of years later, I wrote an English Haunting specifically to go and film there. And that's kind of how it sometimes works. Location can inspire me to come up with a certain idea,
No, that's killer. Yeah, location definitely matters for, a good horror movie.
Yeah, so sort of more British horror with a sort of Lovecraft influence that is sort of me being able to just explore. This is the thing with, I've made a whole bunch of feature films by now, all at this sort of indie level. And the most important thing with all of them for me is not for them to be necessarily as good as they can possibly be or flawless, because they cannot be flawless because of the budgets. In fact, they're always going to be actually incredibly flawed, because of their budget limitations. But something I can do is I have the freedom to experiment. So with each film, I kind of challenge myself and experiment in different ways, which I think is why each one tends to be like of a radically different subgenre. Like my film Vampire Virus is set in modern times and is full of like neon lighting and lots of colors and lots of like sort of big synth music. And that's completely different to the film that I did before, which was English Haunting, which is subtle, muted colors, big wide angles, very sort of still camera, and not cutting too fast. So I love to just play with all the different styles. That film was completely radically different to my film Winter Skin, which was set out in a log cabin out in the snow, which has got sort of like a Italian Western sort of inspiration in the cinematography and stuff. Films like The Great Silence and films like that were my main inspiration. So I'm always trying to sort of do something new and challenge myself, basically, and that's like the most important thing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Always challenge yourself to, progress in your art, what you're doing and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when somebody finally gives me a budget that is like of a decent size where I'm not in a tiny crew, then I'll stop experimenting and I'll stick to what I feel like I've learned over the years and what I can do best, so I can deliver the best possible movie. But at the moment, I'm just having fun. I have in my head, I have a rule that by the time I'm 30, I would love to be able to be a bit more making films in a bit more of what feels like, I guess, like a more legitimate way, where I'm just the director, and hopefully the writer. I'm just like the writer director, and here I am, and I've got a crew at my disposal, and they're going to do things really professionally, so that it's not me trying to at the last minute do something, wallpaper a set, paint a bit of scenery, have to stand in and do all the jobs. I'm hoping that by the time I'm 30, I can put behind me the sort of DIY filmmaking thing. I hope I will grow out of that. But I've got still more than 2 years till I get to there. So I just have said to myself, just have fun, until you get to that age, just have fun.
Mm-hmm. You're doing a killer job, man. Like, I love your work and stuff, and I like your attitude. Just yeah, you're on your way to like great things. You've already done some killer things already, so like, and you're super young too, which is crazy. Like, to do all the stuff that you've already done and that you're doing, it's pretty damn cool.
Thank you.
Where can listeners check out your films? I know a couple of them are streaming on Tubi if they have Tubi, but there's some other spots they can check your stuff out at.
Yeah, I mean, the best thing to do, I think, is just go on to Amazon and just type in Charlie Steeds, because basically you'll basically find anything that's out in whatever country you're in. Just type in Charlie Steeds and all my films will come up. I don't know which specific places each specific film is in. I mean, in America, I'm pretty sure all of the films are out on DVD. But yeah, and I don't, to be honest, I don't know. I don't even know what Tubi is. I always have people writing to me saying they watch my film on Tubi, but I'm not sure entirely what it even is. I don't think we have it in the UK. But I'm old school. I love physical media. I love having the DVD. I've got a gigantic DVD library in my flat, of about 2,000 movies probably. Yeah, if you want to get the DVDs, go on Amazon or eBay if you're cheap. Type in Charlie Steeds, and yeah, should come up.
Excellent. Well, this has been a great talk, Charlie, man. I really appreciate you being on my podcast. This was really cool. And I think this information that you talked about here, like with film and everything, is going to be super inspirational to a lot of like, up and coming filmmakers or people haven't started yet, I think it's great.
I hope so. I mean, if my films fail to be entertaining just for horror fans, then if you're an aspiring filmmaker, you can at least look at my films and pick them apart and see, how you could how easy it is to be able to do the level that I'm doing right now. And like I say, you can make a full-time career doing it. So if I was back at film school and someone had just handed me my 10 features that I've done now to sort of look at and analyze, I would have seen, I would have learned a lot basically, because I have learned so much over the past sort of 5 years. So if nothing else, they could be useful for that.
Well, this was great, Charlie, and I hope you have a good rest of your night over there. I know you said it's nighttime where you're at, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah, no, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Well, you take it easy, and it was great talking with you.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you.
Yes. Take care.